After recently announcing their plan to break the business up into 6 different units, each with their own board of directors, CEO, and even their own ability to IPO in future, Alibaba executives hosted a short Q&A session with analysts and investors. It was a chance for investors to probe for a little more detail on how the split from Alibaba might look, and also a chance for management to add a little bit more information to the official announcement that came out earlier in the week. The Q&A session covered some key points on what will likely stay the same with Alibaba, what will change, and what's sort of the timeline around some of these things in terms of the business splitting out into these 6 different units, and also the potential timeline for future IPOs. As a follow-up to the previous video here on the channel where I went through exactly what the official announcement was from Alibaba, this video is going to go through some of the highlights from that Q&A session with management. So if you enjoy the video and haven't subscribed to the channel already, please be sure to do so. But with all that said, let's get straight into some of these highlights from this Alibaba special Q&A. Now, the first question asked on the call was quite a key one really, which was essentially, could you please tell us more about the key objectives of the new organizational and governance structure? And the CEO went on to add quite a bit of information about basically what their goals are with splitting Alibaba into these 6 different kind of business units and 6 different separate companies with their own board and CEO and so on. He said, basically since 1999, Alibaba has continued to grow over its 24-year journey to date. Through that process, we've been evolving as a company, our business models have also been evolving, iterating, and we've continued throughout our history to continually leverage advancements in the relations of production in order to unleash new productive forces, value creation, and drive progress. An example of that is when we turned 1 Taobao into 3 Taobaos, so to speak, 12 years ago. And this kind of evolution has unleashed tremendous productivity. Therefore, this organizational transformation represents the same kind of courage that we've always brought to bear in driving these kinds of organizational transformations to unleash productivity. Perhaps the biggest difference in respect of this organizational transformation compared to the previous ones is that Alibaba today has already grown into a much larger and more complex organization. We have a wide variety of businesses of different natures, different stages of development. They're competing in different market environments and serving different customers. Therefore, this reorganization is more necessary than any previous one, but it's also more challenging. He went on to say, we've been stressing the idea of agility and being a more nimble and agile organization for several years now. This is all the more important in the context of a rapidly changing market dynamics and heightened competition. It's important that we have that agility to move quickly and respond faster to change. This transformation will also create greater ownership and provide incentive plans to the management teams and employees of our business groups and our other investments, which will drive entrepreneurial innovation that will stimulate growth in our business, and that's very important. So a lot covered there from the CEO, probably not too much new information. We know that the business is going to break up into these 6 different components. They'll all be managed rather separately, with their own management teams and boards and so on, and they'll be able to move a little bit more quickly, be more nimble, and also have incentives in place that really relate well to those individual business units. Now, how much that actually differs from what happens today is kind of yet to be seen. Whether this will actually create incremental value and progress is again yet to be seen. But in theory, at least, it sounds promising. Now, the next question here that I want to cover was, could you explain, please, what will be the key differences going forward compared to the previous structure? What will change? What will not change? And when will we see the new structure become effective? Daniel Zhang, Alibaba's group CEO, said, we actually began laying the groundwork for this transformation over the past several years. We've already put in place those several large business segments in terms of our financial reporting. One of the largest changes will be that each of the segments within the company today will each have an independently operating company. Therefore, the relationship between the group and each business group will change. Alibaba Group will be in the nature of a holding company that's the controlling shareholder of the business group companies, and as the controlling shareholder, the Alibaba board will continue to have control over the boards of these new companies, in particular in the initial phase. Alibaba will be more in the nature of an asset and capital operator than a business operator. Perhaps of most interest to the market, each of these companies will be set up to enable finance financing from third parties. So when conditions are right, these companies can indeed go to the market to seek financing from third parties or IPO. We expect that these changes will unleash more vitality from our business units. Now, one of the questions I had in the previous video was basically whether this changes any of the long-term goals and mission for Alibaba as an overall group. Daniel Zhang touched on that point in his answer to this question. He said, we will continue to share the same vision of being a good company that lasts 102 years. So that will continue to be a shared vision across all the companies. I, as chairman and CEO, and Toby, that's Toby Zhu, as CFO, will continue to play our due role at the level of the holding company to focus on the long-term development of Alibaba Group as a whole, putting employees first, customers second, and shareholders third, but continuing to work on unleashing and realizing that value. Now, next up, there were a couple of different questions around timing. One was on the timing of when the Alibaba Group will actually split into these 6 different companies, each with their own board and so on. And one was on the timing of potential future IPOs of each of these different units. Now, in terms of the business groups and the governance structure actually splitting out, which will of course need to come first before any future IPOs, they said the governance structures will be changing, but there will be business continuity across our range of different businesses. One of the reasons that we've chosen to announce this transformation in March is because we're beginning our new fiscal year in April. So strategy and business planning for the business groups will commence immediately in connection with that new fiscal year planning cycle. That's underway right now. This transformation will ensure that they are passionate and excited and motivated about the future and can assure their respective businesses move forward in line with a strong strategic plan that can unleash their vitality. And in terms of IPO timing, there wasn't really too much given away here from Alibaba executives, but they did kind of hint at, the market is the best litmus test, and it sounds like that is kind of the end goal that they want to get to for probably most of, if not all of these different business units. They said across all of our business groups and these business group companies, apart from the Taobao team or Commerce Group, each business group company will be set up in a way that enables financing from third parties, spin-offs, and IPOs. We believe that the market is the best litmus test. So each business group company can pursue independent fundraising and IPOs as and when they're ready. After going public, we'll continue to evaluate the strategic importance of those companies to Alibaba, and on that basis, we will decide whether or not to continue to retain control. That will be an important strategic consideration. So of course, with Alibaba Group, being the owners of these 6 different units, they will be by far and away the majority shareholder as these units are split out. The ownership basically will remain the same. But it was interesting to hear some comments around when these units might potentially IPO in future. Alibaba will basically have a decision to make. They can either continue to be a major shareholder in now a public company. For example, Alibaba Cloud might be its own public company, or Cainiao, the logistics arm, might be its own public company. The overall Alibaba holding group at that point will have to make a decision on whether they want to continue being long-term shareholders and majority shareholders of each of those different units, or whether they want to even increase their ownership over time if they get diluted during an IPO, or maybe they might even want to reduce their ownership over time. That will be quite an interesting part of this evolution to see play out. Now, Alibaba are currently running quite a large share repurchase program. It's still got a few years left to run, but they have started to repurchase shares fairly aggressively. Alibaba do issue shares, so that somewhat offsets the buybacks, but we're starting to see the overall share count come down for Alibaba for the first time over the last year or so. So there was a question around that, around whether the split kind of changes their returning of capital to shareholders through the buybacks. The question was, could I just confirm we'll continue to execute the existing share buyback program? Toby Zhu, the CFO, went on to say our commitment to the existing share repurchase program has not changed. Going forward, we will continue to evaluate our share buyback program periodically based on the free cash flow generated from and cash investment needs of our business group companies and other investments. We'll continue to monetize certain of the less strategic investments in our investment portfolio. I'd also like to particularly note that the share buybacks is only one of the methods to enhance shareholder value. Going forward, we will now have even more options to enhance shareholders' value after the restructuring. As these business units become independent companies and as they potentially go IPO, there will be even more ways that that we can enhance value for our shareholders. Now, the second to last question I want to cover here was actually one that I had following this announcement. Basically, how will these 6 different business units, now that they're split out separately, continue to work together? We know that one of the ways that Alibaba has built the competitive advantage that it has over time, particularly in e-commerce, is by having various aspects of their business work together. You know, we've got the classic Jack Ma iron triangle, for example, where they have one arm is e-commerce, one is logistics, and one is finance or payments. And if these businesses are now all split out separately, does that sort of break the iron triangle, or do these businesses continue to work together where it makes sense economically to do so? And the answer to those questions was those synergies are hugely important and is a key differentiator for us in the context of intense market competition. We believe that following these years of development, there are a very stable cooperative relations across the different businesses. They serve one another. They work together. As an example of that, all of Alibaba's own businesses are now on Alibaba Cloud, and that's created a lot of efficiency, including lower costs. So that's a kind of synergy that will certainly continue. Over the years, we've worked out ways to unleash that kind of synergy, and those relationships are already very stable. So that will not change simply by virtue of restructuring. If anything, the new organizational changes will be a better test, a market test, if you like, of the ability of the different businesses to work together and serve each other and jointly create and unleash value. And a very last quick and kind of smaller question was, is Alibaba still pursuing a primary listing status in Hong Kong, or has anything changed? Toby Zhu, the CFO, said, we will continue to evaluate market conditions and external circumstances. That'll take time, but we do continue to make that evaluation. Thank you. So a relatively short but quite interesting Q&A session here with Alibaba management following the fairly major announcement of them reorganizing and restructuring the business out into their own separate units that can potentially IPO in future and will have their own separate boards and so on. It answered quite a few of my questions. There was some in there around the potential future timing of IPOs. It wasn't super clear, but I got the feeling that that is the end goal, is that they want to have most, if not all, of these units probably IPO at some point in the future. It sounds like the mission overall for the company is unchanged, and the businesses will continue to work together internally, particularly where it makes a lot of sense economically, and having the incentives in place that they're talking about might even push some of those partnerships further along than they may have otherwise, particularly if it means cost savings for each of the different business units. So let me know what you think of some of the questions and answers that happened in this session with management. Do you think that splitting Alibaba up in the way that management are talking about here will create more business growth than if Alibaba was just one big behemoth? Do you think it will create extra value for shareholders, or do you think this is again investment bankers in the ear of someone at Alibaba and they're just overcomplicating the whole situation? I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts down in the comments section below. That's really it for me for this one. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please be sure to do so, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers.